My name is Captain Sarah Ellison. I have been in the United States Army for 11 years. In that time, I have slept in the desert with nothing but a rifle and a sleeping bag. I have led a team of 14 soldiers through conditions that most people cannot imagine. I have received a commendation medal, 2 service ribbons, and a letter of recognition from a general whose name you would recognize. I say this not to brag. I say this so you understand the kind of person I am. The kind of person who does not panic. The kind of person who does not fall apart. The kind of person who, when everything goes wrong, takes a slow breath and figures out what to do next. But on a Tuesday morning in October, standing in my barracks at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, holding my phone with both hands, I came closer to falling apart than I ever had in 11 years of service. Because of a phone call. From a bank I had never heard of. About a mortgage I had never signed. For $378,000. Let me say that number again. $378,000. My name. My social security number. My signature. On a loan I knew absolutely nothing about. And when I found out who had done it, it wasn't a stranger. It wasn't an identity thief. It wasn't someone who had stolen my wallet or hacked my accounts. It was the 2 people who had raised me. My mother. My father. Stay with me. Because what happened after that phone call is a story about fraud, about family, about the law, and about what it really means to stand up for yourself when the people who were supposed to protect you didn't. To understand the story, you need to understand where I come from. I grew up in Millbrook, Ohio. A small town. The kind of place where everyone knows your name, your parents' names, and exactly how much money your family does or does not have. My father, Robert Ellison, worked for 30 years at a manufacturing plant outside Columbus. Steady work. Honest work.
He was a quiet man.
The kind of man who fixed things with his hands, said very little, and never once missed a Sunday dinner. My mother, Patricia, stayed home when we were young and later worked part-time at the school district office. She was warm, energetic, the kind of mother who remembered every teacher's name, every school project deadline, every birthday of every friend her children had ever mentioned. She loved us.
I want to be clear about that.
She loved us deeply. She just loved us differently. There were 3 of us. My older brother Daniel, who was quiet like my father and had left for college in Pennsylvania before I was old enough to really know him.
Me.
And my younger sister, Melissa. I have spent a lot of time in my life trying to figure out how to describe Melissa without sounding bitter or jealous or small. Because I am none of those things. But I am honest. And the honest truth is that Melissa was the favorite child in our house in a way that was never said out loud, but was understood by everyone in every room. Melissa got the new car at 16. I got the 2003 Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard that Daniel had driven for 4 years first. Melissa's college tuition was paid in full. My parents told me they couldn't afford to help much, and I said I understood, and I meant it. I took out a small loan, worked 2 jobs, and finished 2 years before I enlisted. Melissa's life was cushioned. Not in a cruel way. Not deliberately at my expense. But cushioned nonetheless. And I learned early to take care of myself. Which is exactly what I did. At 22, I enlisted in the United States Army. My mother cried. My father shook my hand and held it for a long time without saying anything. Melissa texted me a heart emoji. And I left. The Army gave me something my childhood hadn't. It gave me clarity, structure, purpose. A world where what you earned was directly connected to what you put in. Where your rank meant something real. Where nobody's parents could buy them an easier path.
I thrived.
Basic training was hard. I won't pretend otherwise. But I had grown up doing hard things quietly, and it turned out that was exactly the skill set the Army rewarded. I made rank faster than most of my peers. I deployed to Afghanistan in my 3rd year. 8 months. I came home different, not broken, but changed. More certain of what mattered. Less patient with what didn't. I deployed again 5 years later. This time to Kuwait and then briefly into Iraq. 10 months. I came home with a commendation and a deeper understanding of my own strength. In between those deployments, I built a life. I saved carefully. I lived below my means. I drove used cars and cooked my own meals and put money aside every single month. And 4 years ago, I purchased a small piece of land in Ridgway, Colorado. 4 acres. Quiet. Beautiful. Bordered by pine trees on two sides and a creek that ran fast in spring and slowed to a gentle trickle by August. It was my retirement plan. My future. The place I had decided I would build a small home when my service was complete. I had taken out a small personal loan to help purchase it, secured against my own savings and my excellent credit score. My credit was perfect. 792. I had worked for that number the same way I had worked for my rank. Carefully. Deliberately. Over many years. My name was clean. My finances were solid. My future was mine.
Was.
October 14th. I remember the date because it was 2 days after my 34th birthday, which I had spent on base eating mediocre cake with my unit and video calling my father, who had given me a long speech about how proud he was of me. I remember thinking that night that things were good. That I had built something real. That the next chapter, the one with the land in Colorado and the quiet mornings and the life I had earned, was getting closer. 2 days later, my phone rang at 7:42 in the morning. Unknown number. Ohio area code. I almost didn't answer. Is this Sarah Ellison? Yes. Who is this? Ma'am, my name is Kevin Marsh. I'm a collections specialist at First Federal Lending in Columbus, Ohio. I'm calling regarding a cosigner default on loan number 4471B. This account is now 97 days past due. We've been attempting to reach you at this number and at a previous address for several months. I sat down. Not dramatically. Not in a panic. I sat down the way I had been trained to receive bad news, slowly, deliberately, making sure my body was stable before I asked my brain to process anything. I'm sorry, I said carefully. I think there may be some confusion. I'm not aware of any loan I've co-signed. Ma'am, we have a signed loan agreement with your full legal name, Sarah Marie Ellison, your social security number ending in 4471, and your signature on the cosigner line. The primary borrowers are listed as Robert Allen Ellison and Patricia and Ellison. The loan was originated on March 14th of last year for the purchase of a residential property in Gahanna, Ohio. The loan amount was $378,000. I heard every word. Robert Allen Ellison. My father. Patricia and Ellison. My mother. March 14th of last year. I was in Kuwait on March 14th of last year. I had the base check-in logs to prove it. Mr. Marsh, I said, and I was proud of how level my voice was. I need you to email me those documents immediately. He did. I opened my email. I opened the PDF. And there it was. My full legal name. My social security number. My date of birth. My old Ohio address, the one I had lived at before I enlisted, the one my parents still had on file for me. And my signature. I stared at that signature for a long time. It was close. Someone had clearly worked at it. Practiced it, maybe. The general shape was right. The proportion was right. But there was one thing wrong. Since 3rd grade, I have had a specific loop in the lowercase e of my last name, a small, tight circle that closes completely before the line continues. My 3rd grade teacher had taught me that, and I had never changed it. The signature on that document did not have that loop. Someone had forged my signature. And I already knew who. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. I sat with my phone in my hands for 11 minutes. I know because I checked the time when the call ended and I checked it again when I finally dialed my mother's number. 11 minutes of sitting completely still, doing what soldiers do when something terrible happens, absorbing it, containing it, deciding what to do next. My mother answered on the 4th ring. Sarah, honey, how are you? I was just thinking about you this morning, Mom. Something in my voice stopped her. She knew me well enough for that. Mom, I just received a call from a company called First Federal Lending in Columbus. Silence. Not the silence of someone confused. Not the silence of someone trying to remember. The silence of someone who had been waiting for this call for a very long time. Sarah, did you forge my signature on a $378,000 mortgage? A long pause. And then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, we didn't have a choice. I want to tell you that I screamed. that I lost my composure entirely, that I said everything I was feeling in that moment with the full force of 11 years of discipline and 2 combat deployments behind it. But I didn't. I asked her to explain. And she did. Here is what I learned in the next 22 minutes. Melissa's husband, a man named Craig Novak, who I had met perhaps 8 times in my life and never fully trusted, had run a small landscaping business for 6 years. By all accounts from the outside, it had been doing well. New trucks, new equipment, a small office, a growing client list. What nobody had known, what Melissa herself claimed not to have known, though I have my doubts, was that Craig had been borrowing against the business for years, taking loans to cover operating costs, paying old loans with new ones. The kind of financial spiral that looks fine from the outside right up until the moment it doesn't. 18 months ago, it collapsed. The business went under. The debts came due. And Craig and Melissa, who had purchased a 5-bedroom house in Gahanna 2 years earlier on the assumption that the business would keep growing, were suddenly looking at foreclosure. My parents, unable to watch their favorite child lose her home, had decided to intervene. They had taken out a second mortgage on their own house to help. But their credit, weakened by years of modest income and a few late payments in the years after my father's plant had reduced hours, wasn't strong enough on its own to secure the full amount needed. So they had used mine. Without asking. Without telling me. Without even considering, apparently, that what they were doing was a federal crime. They had my social security number from old tax documents. They had my old address. They had seen my signature on enough birthday cards and Christmas letters over the years to approximate it. And they had done it while I was 7,000 miles away, serving a country that apparently could not protect its own soldiers from their own families. We need say no, my mother said. Softly. Almost gently. As if that explained it. And there it was. The most honest sentence my mother had ever said to me. They knew. They had sat down together, my quiet, honest father and my warm, loving mother, and they had made a deliberate decision to commit fraud against their own daughter because they knew she would refuse to be complicit in it. They knew it was wrong. They did it anyway. Mom, I said. My voice was very steady. I was almost frightened by how steady it was. I need you to understand something. This loan is in default. 97 days past due. That means my credit has already been damaged. My land in Colorado, the land I bought with my own money, that I have been saving for since I was 24 years old, is at risk. My financial future, which I have built entirely on my own without a single dollar of help from this family, is on the line because of a decision you made without my knowledge, without my consent, and without any regard for what it would do to me. Craig is working on it. He's trying to. Craig, I said, is not my problem. Craig's business decisions are not my problem. Craig's house is not my problem. My name is my problem. And I am going to fix it. I hung up. I sat in the silence of my barracks room. And for the first time in 11 years of military service, I let myself cry. Not for long. Not loudly. Just for a few minutes, alone in a room that smelled like floor wax and coffee, letting myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Then I dried my face. And I got to work. I want to be honest with you about the 48 hours that followed. Because I think people expect soldiers to be fearless. To make hard decisions without hesitation. To never doubt themselves. That is not entirely true. For 48 hours, I went back and forth. Part of me, the part that had spent 34 years learning to smooth things over with my family, to ask for less, to absorb more, wanted to find a quiet solution. Pay off the default somehow. Protect my credit without destroying my family. Find a way to fix it that didn't require me to use words like fraud and federal crime in the same sentence as my parents' names. I had been doing that my whole life. Absorbing. Adjusting. Asking for less so that Melissa could have more. But I kept coming back to one thing. They had done this while I was deployed. Not while I was home and available to be asked. Not in a moment of genuine emergency where there was no other option. They had done it deliberately, carefully, and covertly while I was serving my country because they calculated that the distance and the circumstances would make it easier for me not to find out or easier for me to let it go when I did. They had counted on my silence. They had counted on my forgiveness. They had, in the most precise and painful way possible, used my character as a weapon against me. I called my JAG officer, Judge Advocate General, the Army's legal team. Her name was Major Christine Okafor, and she was one of the sharpest people I had ever met in uniform. I laid out the situation. Every detail. The loan. The date. My deployment records. The forged signature. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Captain Ellison, what was done to your name and your credit while you were on active deployment is a federal crime. Forgery of a financial document is a felony. The Service Members Civil Relief Act exists specifically to protect active duty military personnel from financial exploitation, including exploitation by family members. You have full legal standing to dispute this loan, have it declared void, and pursue civil and potentially criminal remedies against the parties responsible." Then she said the words I needed to hear most. "You have every right to pursue this. And frankly, you should. Every right." I had every right. I called my mother that evening. One last time. One last opportunity. "Mom, I need you to understand what I'm about to do. I am going to dispute this loan legally. I am going to submit my deployment records as evidence that I was not present on the date of signing. I am going to have this removed from my credit. And depending on how the bank responds, there may be legal consequences for the people who signed my name. I am telling you this because you are my mother, and I am giving you the chance to understand what is coming. But I am not asking for your permission. And I am not changing my mind." She started to cry. I stayed on the line until she stopped. Then I said goodnight. And I began making calls. The first call was to First Federal Lending. I spoke to a supervisor, not the collections specialist, but his manager, a woman named Diane who sounded like she had handled difficult calls before. I explained, in precise and measured terms, that the signature on their loan document was not mine, that I had been on active military deployment in Kuwait on the date of signing, and that I had deployment orders, base check-in logs, flight manifests, and military ID records to prove it. I told her I would be submitting all of this documentation within 72 hours. Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Ma'am, if what you're describing is accurate, you may have grounds to have this loan agreement declared void as it pertains to your cosigner status. I'm flagging this account for our legal review team immediately." The second call was to a civilian attorney. Major Okafor had given me 2 names, attorneys who specialized in military financial protection cases. I called both. The first one called me back within 4 hours. His name was David Reyes. He had spent 12 years doing exactly this kind of work. He had seen this situation before, not often, but enough to know exactly what to do. "Here's what we're going to do," he said on our first call, with the calm efficiency of someone who had already mapped the entire battlefield. "We're going to file a formal dispute with all 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, and attach your deployment documentation to each one. We're going to send a certified legal notice to the bank formally contesting the validity of the cosigner agreement. And we're going to send a separate certified notice to your parents and to Craig Novak informing them of the legal action." He paused. "How do you want to handle the criminal side?" I thought about that for a long time. "Let's see how they respond to the civil action first," I said. We filed the dispute within the week. Craig Novak, predictably, hired his own attorney, a man named Frank Bellows who specialized in exactly the kind of creative legal maneuvering that people who have done something wrong and know it tend to require. His response was that I had verbally agreed to co-sign the loan during a phone call with my parents in February of last year. My attorney asked one question in response. One question. "Can you produce any written record, text message, email, recorded conversation, or any other documentation of this alleged verbal agreement?" Frank Bellows asked for a 2-week extension to gather documentation. 2 weeks later, he asked for another extension. He never produced any documentation. Because there was none. Because the conversation had never happened. I was in Kuwait in February of last year. I had spoken to my parents twice, once on my mother's birthday and once when my father had a minor health scare. Neither conversation had involved any mention of a mortgage, a cosigner agreement, or Craig Novak's collapsing finances. My deployment records were submitted to the court. My credit bureau disputes were processed. 6 weeks after I had received that first phone call from Kevin Marsh at First Federal Lending, I received a certified letter from the bank's legal department. The cosigner agreement bearing my name had been declared fraudulently obtained. My name had been removed from the loan. My credit report had been corrected with all 3 bureaus. My credit score, which had dropped to 614 during the period of default, was restored and, in fact, within 90 days, rose to 801, higher than it had ever been. And my land in Ridgeway, Colorado, my 4 acres of pine trees and creek water and quiet mornings, remained entirely, legally, completely mine. David Reyes called to tell me. "Congratulations, Captain," he said. I thanked him. I kept my voice steady. After I hung up, I walked outside and stood in the cold Kentucky air for a long time, looking at nothing in particular, just breathing. It was over. Justice had been done. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Not in the way movies depict victory. Just quietly. Correctly. The way things should have been from the beginning. I need to tell you about the part that doesn't feel like winning. Because I think when people hear a story like this, the fraud, the legal battle, the restored credit, the land still mine, they expect the ending to feel clean, triumphant. Like a movie where the hero rides off into the sunset and the villains have learned their lesson and everyone knows exactly how to feel. Real life is not like that. My parents called me 23 times in the month after the legal notice was served. I answered 3 of those calls. The first was my mother, crying so hard she could barely speak, telling me she was sorry, telling me she had never meant to hurt me, telling me that she had convinced herself it would all be sorted out before I ever found out. I listened. I told her I had hurt her. I told her I needed time. The second call was from Melissa. She did not apologize. She told me that I had destroyed our family by involving lawyers and that I had humiliated my parents who had only ever tried to help. I listened to that too. Then I said, very calmly, "Melissa, your parents committed fraud against me while I was deployed serving this country in order to save a house that you and Craig could not afford and should never have purchased. I did not destroy this family. I protected myself. Those are 2 very different things." She hung up. I have not spoken to her since. The third call was from my father. My father, the quiet man who fixed things with his hands and never missed a Sunday dinner and had held my hand for a long time the day I shipped out for basic training. He said this, "Sarah, I know what we did was wrong. I have known it since the day we did it. I told your mother it was wrong. I said it more than once. And then I signed the paperwork anyway because I didn't know how to tell your sister no. I have been ashamed of myself every day since. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't know if I deserve that. I just need you to know that I am sorry. From the bottom of my heart. I am sorry." I believed him. I still believe him. There is a particular kind of grief that comes from loving someone and knowing that love was not enough to make them do the right thing. My father loved me. I am certain of that. And he still signed his name on a document that committed fraud against me because he loved my sister more in that moment than he feared what it would do to me. That is the truth I have had to sit with. I told him I needed time. I still need time. I don't know if I will ever fully understand how the people who raised you can know something is wrong, genuinely know it, and do it anyway. I don't know if that is something you ever stop needing to understand. What I know is this: I protected myself. I did what was right. I used the law the way the law is supposed to be used, as a shield, not a weapon. And the outcome was just. That has to be enough. For now, it is enough. I am telling you this story for a reason. Not because I want sympathy. I have never been very comfortable with sympathy. Not because I want to make my parents look like villains. They are not villains. They are flawed people who made a terrible decision out of love for the wrong child at the wrong moment. I am telling you this story because I think a lot of people know what it feels like to be the one in the family who takes care of themselves. The one who asks for less. The one who is expected to be strong so that others can afford to be fragile. I think a lot of people know what it feels like to be used by someone who loves you. To have your reliability turned into a liability. To find out that your silence and your strength and your willingness to absorb things quietly had been calculated into someone else's plan. If you are in the military and something like this has happened to you, please know that the Service Members Civil Relief Act exists. JAG officers exist. You have legal protection. You have rights. Use them. If you are not in the military, if you are simply a person who has spent too long being the reliable one, the strong one, the one who gets less because they need less, please hear this. Protecting yourself is not betrayal. Defending your name is not cruelty. Using the law to correct a wrong that was done to you is not revenge, it is justice. And justice is not something you should feel guilty for seeking. The people who love you should not require your silence to feel comfortable. The people who love you should not use your absence as an opportunity. And if they do, if you find yourself holding a document with your name on it that you never signed, or standing in the middle of a situation that someone else created using your life as raw material, you are allowed to fight back. You are allowed to stand up. You are allowed to say, "This is my name, and no one, not a stranger, not a creditor, not even my own family, gets to use it without my permission. My name is Captain Sarah Ellison. I have served this country for 11 years. I have deployed twice. I have survived a divorce, a forged signature, a 97-day loan default, and a legal battle I never should have had to fight. I have 4 acres of land in Ridgeway, Colorado, with pine trees on 2 sides and a creek that runs fast in spring. And I am still standing." If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me your story. Because I know I am not the only one. Take care of yourselves.